Welcome to the Arlington Street Church podcast. Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Please visit ascboston.org for more information about this historic Unitarian Universalist congregation. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
Memorial Day was started in 1865 by formerly enslaved people in Charleston, South Carolina. In gratitude for fighting for their freedom, they exhumed the graves of 257 Union soldiers who had been buried in a mass grave in a Confederate prison camp and worked for 2 weeks to honor them with a proper burial. On May 1st, 2,800 African-American children led a parade of 10,000, marching, singing, and celebrating. 3 years later, General John Logan, commander of the Union Veterans Group known as the Grand Army of the Republic, issued an official proclamation designating the 30th of May for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of the more than 620,000 comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. General Logan chose May 30th because it was a rare day that didn't fall on the anniversary of a Civil War battle. President Ulysses S. Grant presided over that first Memorial Day ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, which until 1864 had been Confederate General Robert E. Lee's plantation. Some 5,000 people decorated the graves of the 20,000 Union and Confederate soldiers buried there. It is impossible to imagine the scope of the carnage, to imagine the grief or the glory in its wake. But today, 151 years later, we pause to honor, to give thanks, and to remember. I'm thinking today about the healing power of memory, specifically of happy remembering, the opposite of dismembering, remembering to put back together again, to restore to wholeness. I invite you to let your mind turn on evocative memories, perhaps the smell in the air before summer rain, the twang of a basketball hitting the rim and bouncing away, the color of cotton candy and the smell and sugar on your teeth, the feeling of new shoes, something very soft, the sound of the voice of your favorite person. Japanese film director and screenwriter Akira Kurosawa said, "It is the power of memory that gives rise to the power of imagination." In July of 1798, English Romantic poet William Wordsworth returned to Tintern Abbey and the banks of the River Wye, having been gone for 5 summers and 5 long winters. He stands in the shade of a sycamore tree and writes of how the view before him has comforted him over the years since he last saw it. Close your eyes if you'd like and listen to a minute and a half lifted from this beautiful poem. These beauteous forms, through a long absence, have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them in hours of weariness sensations sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind, with tranquil restoration. Feelings, too, of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Nor less, I trust, to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burthen of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood, almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. You can open your eyes. Wordsworth's words evoke the power of happy recollection, visiting a storehouse of joy. Days after I arrived at college, a new friend came to my room one morning, distraught. His parents had just called to say that in the night his childhood home had burned to the ground. Everyone had escaped, but nothing had been saved. He was in shock, completely disoriented. We went out for a walk and he told me about everything he'd lost: his brand new high school diploma, the piano on which he'd learned to play, generations of photographs, the stuffed giraffe his beloved grandmother had given him when he was born, but that he'd been too embarrassed to bring to college. We walked for a long time as he slowly but surely re-entered his body, and what was physically destroyed was recreated in his mind and in his heart. Memory is like that. It restores to us what has been taken. French novelist Marcel Proust wrote that memory comes down as a rope let down from heaven to draw us out of the abyss of non-being. When calamity was threatening his people, the great Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, founder of Hasidic Judaism, would go to a certain holy place in the forest, light a sacred fire, and recite a special prayer, asking for a miracle. And in this way, the miracle was accomplished, averting tragedy. Many years later, when the Baal Shem Tov's disciple, the Maggid of Mezrich, had to intervene with heaven for the same reason, he went to the same place in the forest where he told the master of the universe that while he did not know how to light the sacred fire, he could still recite the special prayer. Once again, the miracle was accomplished and his people were spared. Many, many years later, the people of the Maggid of Mizrech's disciple, Rabbi Moshe Leib Erblach of Sasov, faced near certain catastrophe. The rabbi went to the holy place in the forest, but he did not know how to light the sacred fire, nor did he know the special prayer. Yet, O God, have pity on us, he prayed. And again, tragedy was averted. And finally, many years later, the great-grandson of the Maggid of Mezrich, Rabbi Israel of Rusin, found his congregation in the face of mortal danger. Sitting in his study, his head in his hands, he prayed to God from the depths of his heart, "O God, I do not know the holy place in the forest. I cannot light a sacred fire, and I cannot recite the special prayer. All I can do is remember and tell the story of miracles in times past. I ask that once again you show us mercy and deliver us from peril. And once again, the miracle was accomplished. From memory, a miracle. Neuropsychologist Dr. Michelle Bengston writes, I repeatedly, unexpectedly come on this tiny torn scrap of paper with my mother's writing scrawled on it. That in itself makes me smile. I'm grateful for my memories of her. I don't recall when she wrote it or why, but it was important enough to me that when I received it, that I've kept it for over a decade. It says simply, God gives us memories so that we may have roses in the winter. Augustine, the sainted 4th century philosopher, Catholic theologian, and agnostic, believed that memory is divine. Unitarian Universalist Robert Manning writes, for Augustine, our human capacity to remember means that time both passes and is preserved. Because of memory, we are somehow connected not just to the present, to what is happening now, but to all that has been, but is never entirely gone. Memory for Augustine is ultimately about connection. It is through memory that connection doesn't end. Augustine even believes that our human power of memory connects us in some mysterious way with the divine by giving us a little glimpse of eternity. But of all the amazing things Augustine says about memory, Robert Manning concludes, this is my personal favorite in Book 10 of the Confessions, when he's explaining how amazing memory is and how it transforms our experience of the present. He says, essentially, and with deep gratitude, I can remember the difference between the smell of lilacs and the smell of violets, even though at the moment there are no violets or lilacs. My own war dead are those who lived and died with AIDS. On this Memorial Day, I'm remembering my Provincetown parishioner, Paul Richards, a big, blonde, boyish Midwesterner with the energy and exuberance of a Labrador retriever. On his own initiative, with his Baptist heart, Paul recruited new church members by inviting groups of 6 friends at a time to Sunday brunch in his home. The hitch was that the invitation started with the church service from 11 to noon. If you planned to eat, you had to meet Paul in his pew. He was shameless. He was charming. One late Sunday afternoon, it was a beautiful afternoon, the last wedding party of the day was being photographed on the front lawn of the church, and Paul popped into my study and said, my boat's at the pier, let's go. I was exhausted, but I went. Like many of my male parishioners then, Paul was living against that relentless clock, with Kaposi sarcoma erupting on his left calf. I knew we didn't have much time left together. Paul motored way, way out into the bay until the leaning steeple of the meeting house took its place in Provincetown's silhouette on the horizon. He threw anchor and we sat there in silence, imagining perhaps that we were a little distance from all the dying and death and grieving. And then Paul said to me, Kim, even if it kills every single one of us, even if there's no one left to tell these stories, it matters that we care for each other in all this madness. It matters that even in the face of death, we love each other so well. Paul died, but I lived to remember and to recall him to you now, more than 30 years later. Paul's last words are inscribed on his gravestone. They say, "Speak from your heart." Beloved spiritual companions, memory comes as a rope let down from heaven to draw us out of the abyss of non-being. May the healing power of memory give rise to the power of imagination. And through memory, in our minds and in our hearts, let us recreate what can never be destroyed. As we pause to honor and to give thanks, may we remember and so restore to wholeness beauty and joy and acts of kindness and love. Amen. Wonderful. Let's join hands for the benediction. Words from Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Let us keep this faith, my friends, and pass it on. The service begins when the service ends. Bless your hearts. Amen.
you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. 'Cause your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. 'Cause your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people.
Please visit ascboston.org for more information about this historic Unitarian Universalist congregation. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.